T-34 that they upgraded to a T-34-85, and then they wanted this radical new design, and that is this one, the T-54. And today, this is the most produced tank ever in history. There's over 50,000 of these produced in Russia, Czechoslovakia, and Poland. The world first saw this in 73, 74 at the Kremlin in one of their big parades. And this was made, there was about 25 to 30,000 of T-72s made today. You turn on your television, you'll see that the Russians are pulling these out of long-term storage and pulling them out of museums. And these are being sent to the front in Ukraine. This T-72, this is used currently by the Ukrainians and the Russians, even though it's older. But this was, when we talk about Iraq, this was used by the Republican Guards. This was the elite units that they had. And this has 125 smoothbore cannon on it. You notice it's a similar shape, but it's much lower. It's lower because they went from a 4-man crew to a 3-man crew here. If any of you ever saw World War II, they called it the, what was it, the Desert Rock Patrol. That's the show I'm trying to remember. And they had Jeeps with machine guns. Well, this is the British version of that. This is a Land Rover, and it's about a 19, and you're going to hear them bark. Twin machine guns on the back. This is meant to get in and get out and be fast. All this is made of aluminum, so it's very light, and we have a machine gun on the front. All right, this is a different kind of vehicle. When Canada was looking at replacing the Centurions, they considered buying this. This is made in the UK, and it's a CVRT. That's Combat Vehicle Recce, because it's meant for light reconnaissance, because it's fast, and T, the CVRT, is for track. Now it's made of an aluminum magnesium alloy, so again, it's very light, and it has a Jaguar J60 engine. What you're looking at is a 1985 Humvee. This is the first generation of Humvees. We actually acquired this in Texas from a sheriff. We had this brought up about 8-10 years ago, and the whole spin it around, spin the gun around. He's got it locked now. You see how that whole thing spins around? That's a live 50 cal machine gun. It's going to be firing blanks very shortly. It's a nice piece. You see the exhaust up in the air? And look at the intake here. It's also up in the air. Obviously, they can cross streams up to about that depth.
So that's how I got her to go to camp. And then the whole promotion.
Oh, that? You don't say about one single cadet, especially if you're doing that. You really should give heads up so that you're not expecting it and then still knows.
All right, here we have two more CBRTs, but you'll notice they look a little different than the last one. It's the same chassis, it's the same J60 engine, but it's a different purpose. You'll notice there's a platform that's lifted up, and there's 5 missiles in there, and they're called swing fire missiles. They had a range of about 4,000 meters or 4 kilometers, and it actually, when they fired out of there was a spool of wire that went out behind it because it was guided, it wasn't unguided. Is a scimitar. And you'll notice it doesn't have the big stubby gun. This has got a long, thin gun. This is a 30 millimeter high velocity Raritan. This could fire 6 shots in a row before being reloaded. And these two serve together. There would be roughly 4 of these in a troop, and they would go behind about 20 of these. The scimitars would act as a breaker. It would be a guard, so these guys could take out the tanks. So they go hand in hand.
And what do we have here? Well, this obviously isn't a CBRT. This is a massive American main battle tank. This is the M60 Patton battle tank. It was developed and deployed by the United States in the 1960s and was continuously upgraded by the U.S. Army and exported to other NATO nations. The M60 was deployed with the United States Marine Corps in the 1990-1991 Gulf conflict. The Americans also had deployed for the first time their M1 Abrams, but the M60s were there with the USMC. So here we have our operational M60 Grumpy as a 105 millimeter main weapon. Could take out any other main battle tank on the battlefield, including the T-54, 55s, or the T-72 that the Iraqis were fielding. It comes in at about 50 tons.
We've got 2 more coming out at the same time.
Vehicle. This one some of you might be very familiar with. It is the ever long serving M113 armored personnel carrier. It's not just a big aluminum metal block. This is actually meant, as you can see, for carrying troops in and out of the battle space. It has a driver, a crew commander, who could also have a 50 caliber machine gun mounted there to give some support to the troops, and carries a whole section of infantry in the back. Now at the rear of the vehicle, there's actually an armored door that they can open to degress from the vehicle.
The ones we've already talked about, they're getting ready for the battle. They're going into their pre-position before we advance. And the Iraqis have done the same thing. The pre-53, Canada had about 110 of them. We have 8 or 9 Canadian ones here, and we have 2 or 3 British ones. This one was in the Gulf War with the 14th, 20th King's Hussars. So how bad do you want to see this reenactment? All right, well, let's get this.
So here you can see there's some Iraqi forces are just heading out. They're just in defense, just a few Iraqi infantry. But beyond that was a great desert, and it was imagined that Allied forces could never cross that desert. So they're trying to run back and alert that the Allies are here. Reconnaissance moving. So now the Allies know where the enemy force is. Now you see the bombs that they threw. Because that reconnaissance force is a very lightly armored vehicle. They can't take a hit from the enemy, so they pop smoke and they're retreating back to their main force. It's called GPS, and this was completely unknown to the Iraqis and was still a military secret at the time in 19. Global positioning systems across the desert. Oh, now here comes the T-54 Iraqi tank with that dish. 113. Forces are really taking a pounding here. I think their T-54 has been in. That's causing the infantry now to be now basically a wall of Allied armor just converging on most of them did retreat or surrender. And ladies and gentlemen, that's pretty much how the Iraqi war was won. Let's hear it for the veterans, volunteers, professional reenactors who put together this incredible show. Now, was that not amazing? Do you want to see more of this? All right. So this afternoon, plane tank battle. We're going to have a Second World War battle. It's going to be just as loud, just as exciting. Now,
a very blessed man. My wife likes tanks. So I welcome you, and I'm welcoming all of our viewers around the world on the World of Tanks podcast. Welcome you guys wherever you are.
So, definitely not a tank. So what you're looking at is a Second World War quad, which is a truck, a limber, which is a trailer that carries ammunition, and an artillery piece, a 25-pound on the dirt road. Now this gun belongs to the Toronto Limber Gunners. They're part of 7th Toronto Canadian Artillery. It's their historical troop, so to speak. And most of their members are retired artillery personnel. And they're going to demonstrate to you right now how they unlimber that 25-pounder. Now the truck itself is or Canadian Military Pattern Vehicle. So many people don't know this, but Canada produced a huge amount of military vehicles during the Second World War, right across the country. And right here in Oshawa, Ontario, there's an auto plant that at one time was the largest autoplex on the globe. And during the Second World War, when Britain was fighting alone and the Commonwealth and Canada were fighting against the Axis powers before the Grand Alliance, the UK had lost most of its equipment at Dunkirk, or dispersed it into the Empire, and Canada had to meet that call. And Canada produced more military vehicles than Germany, Italy, and the Empire of Japan combined. Can you believe that? Right here in Canada, we produce more vehicles than all of the Axis powers. Tanks, aircraft, and trucks like the Canadian Military Pattern Truck.
Oh no!
Now this is going to be very loud, so I'm going to give the command to fire, just so you're prepared. And you can imagine an entire battery of these firing on the enemy. And also imagine a bunch of young men from 18 to 25 slugging shells as fast as they can, each gun firing up to 25 rounds a minute. Now obviously our retired gunners are not going to be doing that. So on my mark, they will set off the gun. Limber gunners, is your battery ready? Fire! And then a T-72 Staghound. And they're both flying the flags and have the markings of Canada's own Royal Canadian Dragoons.
18 trenches on! Fire! Fire down! Ready! Fire! Fire down!
Let's hear it for the Staghound, the Royal Canadian Dragoons. Yeah, we'll save that for Tora. All right, we'll save that for her. Yeah, we'll stop and give you that back. So what you're seeing here, is it a tank? Is it not a tank? Well, it used to be a tank. We're gonna let the kangaroo do a lap. So what we're looking here is this is a Canadian-built tank. So in the earlier part of the Second World War, this is actually part of the story and the development of what would later become the Sherman line of vehicles. That's Sophie. Did she sneak in there too? Okay. So this is a Ram tank, very unique to Canada and Canadian production, but it's not a tank anymore because the turret is gone. So what this is a Ram Kangaroo. It's in effect a very early armored personnel carrier. All right, thanks again to the Canadian War Museum. Quite a lot of tank dust out here. Vehicle, the TAP V. Let's have the ONTARs go around. And TAP V, it stands for Tactical Armored Patrol Vehicle. Obviously much larger, much faster than any tracked vehicle. The TAP V was actually a concept Canada was looking for during the Afghanistan mission when we were tasked with protecting a lot of convoy routes, logistical routes. It was a perfect vehicle at the time for protecting those convoys and VIPs, etc. However, it was not ready in time. You can see that the G-Wagon is not an armored vehicle. You might think of it as like a Jeep. Of artillery. So you can see that Centurion, basically the design for the Centurion by the Canadian Armed Forces, and was a start and stop project for, like I said, about 15 years. Our volunteers worked on this, and the finishing touches, re-engineing the vehicle and the electrical system, was about the hardest part the last 5 years. Now you look at the main weapon, that's a 20-pounder main cannon. Now they were eventually outfitted with the 105. Okay, so that is the end of the Meet the Tank segment. We hope you learned a little bit about these vehicles, a little bit about the organizations that are involved, not just about the Ontario Red Wing Museum. Enactment that Bart has quite a bite. It's the 15th of July, 1943. Allied forces landed on the 10th against limited resistance. The Italian forces that the Canadians, the Americans, and the British came up against either quickly surrendered, put up a short fight and retreated, or otherwise just disappeared into the hills of Sicily. The Allies became complacent moving so quickly from town to town, deeper into Sicily. The invasion was going ahead of schedule, well ahead of their main unit, moving slowly, looking for the enemy. They're going to wait for a tank of the Three Rivers Regiment to give them some support before they decide to just roll into this town. The scout car has been hit. A young major is seriously wounded in the scout car. The infantry of the hasty beast, however, the major wounded, hiding behind his dingo, using it for cover. A tank of the Three Rivers Regiment rushed here in the But now the armored elements of the Hermann Goering Division have arrived. There's a Panzer III, pops up in overwatch position. The Sherman with all the smoke. One hit. The Sherman crew has no idea where that hit came through. No. The Canadians are in a very difficult position. Few troops on the ground. The troops have been taken out. And that major frantically using his radio to reach nearby units asking for support. Pinned down behind his dingo by an MG-42. And you can see infantry elements of the Hasty B Regiment. They're arriving on the field. And troop, another M4 Sherman enters the field. Should be allow the Canadians some support to push the Germans back. You can see the Canadian troops trying to flank the position. Here come the Hasty B's charging the position. Now they have the support. Germans have fallen back, but still in a very strong position, especially when they have that Panzer. The Germans are without any armor. Their Panzers down, Hanemags burning. Tanks covering the position so that Canadians can move forward. Continues to call for additional help and direct all reinforcements onto the German target.